We're live.
Yeah,
It's always here we go. Now, okay, excellent. People are coming in. So once you go live, then it's like, do people actually see that you're going live? So that's always exciting. All right, excellent. We got some good folks. It's Friday, so everyone's ready for the weekend.
right,
And I hear spring break's coming. What'd you say? Sorry.
right. 15th.
It's the 13th, and it was Friday the 13th last month too, because 28 days. So excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I know a lot of folks are probably prepping to go on spring break or vacations because it's finally getting warm in some places, not everywhere. Obviously, where I am in Nevada, it's like going to be in the upper 80s today. So I'm not going to complain. I get to wear my sleeveless shirts. Like I'm going running after this. So, Dr. Miller, you're going to join us today. We have a few things we want to talk about, mostly about micronutrient or just nutrients in general to see if there's any nutrient gaps, what we can be paying attention to. But I thought it'd be interesting to see how the brain gets fed, and then we can kind of talk about some nutrients and maybe how some of those will be highlighted in how you're feeling in your brain. So, anyway, you want to share this really kind of quickly how the brain actually allows things to come through? Because there's a
Yeah,
special barrier, right?
right. So, hi everybody. Welcome. First of all, nice to be here. So my last article and what we're talking about today, at least at the beginning, is about the blood-brain barrier. And why that's so important is the brain is very specialized, obviously, and we know about the gut-brain barrier. We've heard a lot about that and how it's one cell layer thick and it's held together by tight junctions, and how it can those tight junctions can break, and uh, and once that happens, then bacteria and peptides and larger products can get across, and that's called leaky gut or endothelial hyperpermeability. And so we know about that. We've heard about that. But the brain is specialized because we have inflammatory cells, we might have viruses, we might have a toxin, something we've ingested, we've absorbed in our blood, and we don't want all that to go into our brain. And so the brain is, the human body is amazing, and it's come up with a way to keep the brain safe from everything happening in the body to a point. And so what that looks like is it has this what's called the blood brain barrier, which is a network of cells that are like 400 times tighter together than the gut is and other parts of the blood vessels. And so things can't just leak across accidentally. It has to be allowed through. And for example, you have to get glucose to your brain. Well, we have these special glucose transporters to get the glucose to your brain. We allow for the oxygen to go across and the carbon dioxide to come across. We allow for nutrients to come across when needed, but it's blocking the immune cells. So if you're inflamed, those immune cells in general can't penetrate into the brain to cause brain inflammation. Or um, if you're exposed to something and it happens to be in your bloodstream, a virus does not immediately cause encephalitis or brain infection. For the most part, it stays in your body. And so this is the blood-brain barrier. And the point of it is that it's there protecting us all the time, and it's pretty tight. It's got these specialized cells, astrocytes and periocytes. These are specialized brain cells that have like little feet, microglia, and they're just really tightly holding it together. And so it's doing its job, right? And on the other side of those, you have these glia cells, which are within the brain. Those are the brain nervous system, and those are doing it. They're cleaning house and getting rid of everything and taking care of everything up there. So the goal is to keep everything down here, feed the brain healthfully, and then you have a cleaning house and taking care of everything. That's a happy, healthy brain, and that's how it's supposed to look like.
Perfect. That's an excellent summary. And I always like to look at the drawings of the cells when, like, especially the astrocytes are like little, you reach in and grab hold, and it's like these little feet and pedicles and things like that. Anyway, it's fun to look at. Definitely one of my favorite classes was neurology and understanding neuroanatomy and stuff during medical school because we actually had brains in a bucket that humans had donated and so generously to science. So fascinating, fascinating stuff. So, with that in mind, there's a world we live in now called modern urban, westernized world like in the United States and in, I would say, probably the majority of the world where we struggle to get sufficient nutrients. I mean, I think people are so worried about macronutrients, their protein, or eating their low carb or higher carb or low fat or higher fat diet, whatever diet of the day is for them. But I think there's some underlying micronutrients that we're not really paying attention to. And I think those are really important to kind of point out. We can speak to what those are, maybe how to test them, what some of the symptoms are. Do you have one at top of mind for yourself? And then maybe we can just go back and forth and share ones that I pay attention to, especially with my particular audience. But anyone in particular on top of mind for you, Chris?
Well, I would say there are several micronutrients that I look for as well. And I think it's important to point out when people start getting on limited diets for whatever reason, or if you're eating a standard American diet and not paying attention to your nutrient level, then people are at risk of nutrient deficiencies. So some of them that I'm looking for, I guess I'll start with something that's super common, and that's vitamin D deficiency. Can't always tell you have it, so it's definitely worth testing, but you can see some signs sometimes. So it can be slower wound healing. You might get sick a little more often. Autoimmunity usually happens when people have low vitamin D. It's very common that it's low when it happens. Bone health, certainly we look at it with older people or basically anyone when we're looking at your bone density, we want to make sure. So there are some signs like that, and it's pretty common unless you're actively being in the sun and paying attention to make sure that you're making it and absorbing it and getting the right amount, or you're supplementing with it. So I'd start it off with vitamin D.
Yeah, I think vitamin D is really important. So the test you're going to be looking for is the 25 hydroxy D because that'll be it's a serum test. So that would be the one I typically try to get my patients in that 40 to 60 marker just because if you get, I mean, coming over 30 is fine. Just that 40 to 60 is kind of a nice little buffer. It's not too much, not too little. And certainly below 20 is definitely would be deficient and most physicians will agree with you on that standpoint. Of course, you do worry about your bone health, your immunity. And I would say there is an interesting connection between like type 1 diabetes as well and vitamin D deficiency. So if you have children or you're a grandparent, you might want to relate to parents, make sure that they have their kids' vitamin D checked as well. And of course, you can get vitamin D a variety of ways. There's supplementation out in the sun. But if you live in the higher latitudes where it's cloudy, like when we lived in Washington State or Oregon, we might have only had 2 to 3 months where there was actually reliable sunshine every day. So, this is a place that supplementation, and I think we kind of touched upon it last time. How I was saying I lived in Florida for a bit, and I've lived in most of my time has been in sunny places, but my vitamin D level, I've never been able to get above 30 without supplementation, even running outside in this type of wear, without, sun protection. I know I should wear sun protection because the sun, yeah, I get it. I know before I get lectured on that side, but the vitamin D piece was really not working for me. So you were saying there's some genetic
Hmm.
tendencies for some individuals not to be able to convert that into vitamin D. There's also sun exposure, like mushrooms that have had sun exposure. You might get some vitamin D there. I wouldn't rely on that just because you don't know how much you're getting. But, there's some excellent resources. I particularly like Nature Made. It's a really cheap, reliable brand. You can get anywhere, Walmart. But yeah, so most of my patients require around 2,000 international units daily. That may not be the case for you. You might need a little bit more, you might need a little bit less. Certainly should be tested. And I would not take over 4,000 IUs daily without a physician being aware of what you're doing because you can become toxic on that. So, but
Hmm.
vitamin D, so important.
Hmm.
Excellent.
There
Rick
was
gets back. Go ahead.
COVID where people whose level was closer to 46, 48, close to 50, that they had less significant infections. So that's where I push, I recommend for the same level.
Yeah.
For you try to give people at least a 40 to 50, just for that immune protection. And we didn't talk about it, but cardiovascular protection, like it protects those endothelial. So
Yeah.
important. It's like our whole body needs vitamin D basically, and so, really important
And
nutrient.
And it's actually kinda like a hormone, right? And so, it's
Yeah,
interesting, melatonin and vitamin D are kinda more hormones than they are they should
vitamin
probably be regulated.
that
Um, very much so, but anyway, so yeah, I think and then COVID, people who had better, vitamin D levels did better if they did get COVID, so they
yeah.
had less likelihood of dying and complications, severe complications, so alright, I think we got vitamin D squared away. Um, I think one that comes up common for my patients is magnesium, believe it or not, even on a plant-based diet. It's a little bit harder to measure in the blood. It's not super reliable. It's kind of a poor marker, because only maybe I don't know, 1% or so is actually stored in the blood. So again, it's kinda like calcium when you check it in the blood. It's not very super helpful because it's such a super tightly regulated things. There's a RBC magnesium or red blood cell magnesium that might be a little bit better marker, but it's still, I wouldn't say perfect. But just make sure you're getting plenty of those foods. Magnesium, symptoms, muscle cramps is a big one, especially if you're on a diuretic like hydrochlorothiazide or one of those, difficulty sleeping, you might have muscle twitching, some people are a little anxious. Those are the main one and palpitations, I've definitely seen it help some individuals who had palpitations doing a magnesium, glycinate was really, really helpful. Uh, but
even
some of
headache migraines can respond to that.
uh, migraines, yeah, absolutely, headaches, um, constipation.
Mhm.
I think I'm trying to think of anything else. But mostly I would say the majority of people, it's gonna be sleep and muscle cramping, especially as we get older, and if you're on a diuretic where you're losing the magnesium. But foods, one of my favorites is like pumpkin seeds, zinc, magnesium, dark chocolate. There you go. The doctors are saying go consume some dark chocolate. Um, where else? Avocado, almonds,
Leafy greens have it, but
leafy
it also
greens.
your level of absorption. So certain
Yeah.
people celiac don't absorb magnesium as well as other minerals. Certain people with if you have gut issues at all, so if you're really gassy, bloated, you have loose stools, constipated, there's a good chance you're not absorbing. And then as people get older as well, less stomach acid, people absorb less nutrients. And so even though people um, are eating the best that they can and diverse, you have it's worth checking and testing and seeing how you're doing to make sure you're actually getting enough for you.
Yeah, I agree. So what's the next one on your list, would you say?
So I would say the next one that I look for would be omega-3 fatty acids.
Yep.
Uh, And that is a lot of that it has because I am always thinking about inflammation, dealing with a lot of joint pains, high inflammatory markers, people with any inflammation, basically, but as well as healthy aging. So, your omega 3s, you can easily get it from plants, you can easily get it from animal based. It's easier to get from animal based because what you really need is the EPA and DHA are the omega 3 fatty acids that we're looking for, and those are in fatty fish. So, like salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring are going to have the pre-made EPA DHA. But those fatty fish are getting it from algae, so you can also get it from algae. That's a very good source, and so you get it from there. And then, if you're a plant-based eater, you also can get it from flax seeds, chia seeds, leafy greens. Walnuts have a little bit. Hemp seeds have a little bit. And your body takes that ALA from these plants, and through several pathways and enzymes involved, it converts it into EPA and then DHA. And so it can work great for some plant based eaters where they're able to convert it and they have perfect omega 3s. But the truth is, I think I saw a study where it was about a third of people in the population they looked at, which I can't remember which population that was, but it was a good amount of people did not convert as well, and it was actually, there's a couple genetics where people aren't able to convert the ALA into the EPA and DHA, and those people then are gonna be low if they're only getting it from ALA plant-based sources, so they will need to substitute with EPA and DHA, and so you can check a level, and there's some question, maybe the level's not that good, but I think it's the best that we have right now. And so you check a level, and if it's low, I do replace people with a pre-made, a form of EPA DHA that's from a marine source, so algae.
Mhm.
Well, depending on the person and their diet and their plans, and so once you get a therapeutic, it can help lower inflammation, it can improve joint pains, it's important for cardiovascular endothelial health, it's important for brain health, and especially brain health needs that DHA, and there's certain genetics that need more DHA to get it across. So, certain people with like ApoE4 genes, it's looking like they need even more DHA, and so it's to me, it's super important to check it, make sure people have a good source of it, and that their body is absorbing it and converting it, whether you're plant based or animal, however you're getting it, but that it's optimal for you.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I check mine with patients minimally above 5.5. Greater than 8 is probably ideal for heart health, just for, but in, that's one of the three supplements I recommend everyone have is vitamin D, B12, which is mine next one, but also the algae omega 3s. I like Nordic Naturals is a good individual omega 3 for looking for the megas in the algae component. Someone was asking, just want to make sure I get this question. Jean was asking, I'm sorry, Jen. Jen Watts was asking, what is the best type of magnesium as a supplement for twitchy muscles? I missed it. I would say magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate, 200 to 400 milligrams, because it's pretty better absorbed without the side effects of a little bit of runny stool. If you don't need that. So that would be my suggestion. I know, Chris, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Probably mag glycinate as well. So
Yeah, that's the one I usually go for any of these things. Let me go through to make sure. Shauna says, "Good morning. Thank you for the videos. Love them and learning a lot." Thank you, Shauna. We're glad you're here. And oh, Carol says hi from California. I just want to make sure I'm not missing. Oh, and Jen's asking Nevada. Yep, Nevada, Las Vegas, baby. Never thought I'd live here, but I'm actually enjoying it. But we're going to be leaving on the RV here before it gets too hot. So the one next one kind of hinted to this was B12. Of course, being a whole food plant based eater, B12 is the one supplement, guys, that it's non negotiable. Majority of my patients need to be on 500 to 1,000 micrograms daily. B12 only comes from bacteria. Bacteria actually make it. Then the animals, consume those bacteria through the foods they're eating. It's stored in their muscles. Now we have bacteria that make it, but it's beyond the place of absorption. So there's that. And it's just people some say, well, I'll just, consume foods that have been fortified. Again, you're not sure you're getting it, how well you're absorbing it. There's many things, even people who eat a standard American diet or omnivorous diet, they may be actually low. There's medications like metformin that can actually decrease absorption. Things like your proton pump inhibitors. As you get older, you just don't absorb as well either. So some symptoms, the most common I would say, are like numbness or fatigue or kind of brain fog. I will share a story real quickly. I had a patient that had been vegetarian for majority of her life. She was in her, I think, mid 30s when I finally saw her, and she'd been referred to me, and she was having severe um, musculoskeletal nerve weakness. She was having fatigue, all sorts of things going on. And as we started talking, I was like, well, this sounds like B12 deficiency. And she'd seen lots of doctors, but these doctors are unfamiliar with, I don't know if they don't understand micronutrient deficiency or the specifics of a plant based diet. We went and checked, and her levels were below the low normal. And I still have patients even in that lower normal place that are actually symptomatic of B12 deficiency. And so we actually had to give her injections and within weeks, luckily, because she couldn't even hold on to a cup. She would actually drop a cup. She did not have permanent nerve damage. But you can. So it's something really, really important to pay attention to. So other symptoms might be balance issues. I check a few things. I check a serum B12, a homocysteine, and a methylmalonic acid. Now, these last two, they actually require B12 to be further metabolized. Homocysteine, you want your levels less than 10. There's some other things that can also cause elevated homocysteine. So if your B12 is above 500 on your test, I see 500 to 1100. you might want to go be looking for some other things. That's a different topic of conversation. But definitely, I've seen homocysteine elevated and respond beautifully to more B12, even if you're in that normal range. But again, like I try to get people above that 500. Um, they just seem to do better, and it seems to cover 100% of people, at least removing that potential risk. So,
And
eh,
B12
uh,
also linked with anemia, so it
yeah.
has red blood cells. So sometimes when people are on the low side of normal, giving them B12, people are energized and they actually notice an improvement in energy. So, yep,
Hmm.
important to check it every so often, no matter what diet you're on, because like you said, as you get older, you just don't absorb it as well. But
Yeah.
it has permanent neurologic changes. So it is something that you want to catch early. And if it's even going down, you have a long storage of it in your system. So it does take it some time to get lower. But yeah, so.
Yeah, but I'd say the longer you've been plant-based and you haven't been
Mhm.
supplementing, I think that might be accelerated because if you're eating a diet that has B12 in the food sources, it's probably less of a concern if, if you're eating mostly plants. But again, just something to be really paying attention to, guys. I just that is something that's unnecessary to be have low. You heard it here. So anyway, very, very important. What other things what's else is on your list as far as concerns?
I will take iron on.
Yes.
Iron can also be low, and so typically you measure an iron panel, and you're looking at the ferritin, the iron storage. So, and you can also look for anemia. So, if once it gets pretty severe, you might present with anemia. So, symptoms of being anemic. You're going to have more easily fatigued, shortness of breath. You might get lightheaded with standing. Signs of anemia. You also could get leg twitching and restless legs and things like that. So, anytime you have anemia, you want to make sure you're looking for iron as part of it. You can look at the blood counts, look for MCV and all of this, but you want to make sure you're checking iron levels. But that's pretty late that you're getting anemic. So you can present with basically normal iron, normal circulating iron, normal saturation of iron, but then you have low ferritin. So you're not
Mhm.
anemic and you have normal iron levels, but you have low iron storage. That's the ferritin. And that can be problematic. So typically they say you want it at least 50, and people in the sleep world want it closer to 70, I believe. So it's a little bit higher. Uh,
Mhm.
what can happen when it's low, like we test people and it can be like 8, 15, 20, 25. And so those low numbers can affect people. So you may not be sleeping as well. You might have restless legs. You might be twitching more as well. You might have fatigue. And there's some good studies. I think you and I talked about it, I think a few years ago actually now, but where people who it was replaced to about 50 at least, they did notice improvement in energy and focus and just feeling better overall. So and then things like even like brittle hair,
Hair loss.
hair loss, brittle nails,
Mhm.
cells, things like that can all be related to iron. So, and just to make a public announcement type statement, but if your iron is low, make sure you're looking for the source of it. So,
Yes.
especially as you get older, one of the major causes of low iron can be loss from your gut. So, if you haven't been scoped or if your stool turns black or it can be a colt where you just lose a little bit at a time and you don't even know you have it. So it's really important that if you have low iron that you look for reasons why. But it is relatively common in people eating certain like plant-based diets. And the argument was, oh no, people have plenty of iron on a plant-based diet. Some people do. Some people absorb enough and their levels are fine. Other people, it is actually a little bit low, the ferritin. So they're going to want to replace a little bit. And athletes, runners sometimes can have less, women menstruating. And again, there's an argument, oh no, that's not true. Well, we do see it in our practices, and maybe not everyone. Some women menstruate and their levels are fine, even on a plant-based or plant-predominant diet, but other women it can be low. So those are reasons, and so it's just important to check it.
Yeah,
And
no, I think those are all very, very valid points. So, and women especially, I know that I struggle to keep up with my ferritin elevated, especially towards as I actually entered into perimenopause because my periods got really heavy and they would last longer. And I was running longer distances, and then I'm compounding that, right? So if you drink also a lot of tea and some other things, it can decrease your absorption of iron. So you
Right.
might want to, isolate your tea drinking outside of meals. I find that hard to do. So anyway, but if you do replace your iron, you want to be very, very mindful that you can get too much as well. So you want to be diligent and check that. Definitely probably be under, a guidance of a physician to really pay attention to make sure you're not getting too much. If you are a man and told that you have low iron, you absolutely need to be looking to understand, because it's very rare, even in my plant-based eater men, to have low iron. Like it's very rare that I see that. It's mostly women. But food wise, you can get, of course, from your animal products, but pumpkin seeds come in again. You guys, I eat pumpkin seeds every single day because there's such a little micronutrient powerhouse. But again, those dark green leafies, beans, lots of good sources for iron. Just making sure that you're eating that wide variety of plant foods. And of course, if you eat your animal products, you're probably doing pretty well too. But pay attention to where you're losing it. I think that's really, really important. Um, Next, I think, is zinc. Zinc is an interesting one. I can measure serum zinc. You definitely want to probably test it in the morning because your levels can kind of fluctuate. But as far, again, pumpkin seeds coming for the win for the plant-based pieces, cashews. But what are some of the symptoms? I would obviously we think about immune system, right? Because it's always like take more zinc when you're sick, when you have a cold. That makes sense, right? It also helps with wound healing, hair loss. Zinc is important for your thyroid. It's got some really interesting, very important things. But if you do take zinc, and I think we mentioned this last time for some reason, you want to be mindful that you on the lower end of replacement, less than 10, 15 milligrams, you're probably okay not to worry about copper. But as you take in a lot more zinc, you can decrease your copper absorption. So again, only looking at try to do primarily your food sources. Anything else you want to share about zinc? Because I know you talk a lot about zinc.
Yeah, zinc is a cofactor for like every like cellular function, basically. So it's and like you pointed out, the immune system is one significant place for sure. And there are studies that if people take extra zinc within the first 24 to 48 hours of a cold or flu, that they decrease the length of it by a day or two. So it is worth having that and making sure. And I will say I check levels like you, and I do find people with low zinc levels. So they try to go back, they go out and make diet changes, and it still comes back low. And so need to replace zinc and keep an eye on that, especially for, again, the immune system and wound healing. And like post-op, after someone has surgery, some surgeons will give a mineral supplement, extra zinc, extra copper, extra iron,
Protein.
extra magnesium, right? Protein, so that people heal better, right? Because if you're
Mhm.
deficient in these nutrients, you will have slower wound healing, maybe more bruising, things like that. So you want to make sure it's optimal. And you can get it from food, but some people don't absorb it as well and they won't get it from food. So check your levels. And if it's low, try to get it from food best you can, but you may need to replace it to a good level. So
Perfect. And what's next on your list?
next on my list is iodine. So
Very good.
we see this in people who are trying to be more healthier. So, one, people who don't eat fish are going to be higher risk because sources of iodine are seafood is a very good source, and your salt is iodized so that people get enough iodine. And so, if you're trying not to eat regular table salt, which people either are doing a very low salt diet or they're doing like a little sea salt or something like a cleaner, non-processed form of salt, and so they may not be getting iodine. And people either maybe aren't eating enough fish or not eating any fish if they're for our non-fish eaters out there. And so then your iodine can be low. You can get some from seaweed. So people who eat regular seaweed may have an okay iodine. Excuse me. But it is worth checking in people. And most people on the standard American diet, it's actually okay. It's the people, once they're trying to eat healthier and they start making these changes, that we start seeing it. And so if it is low, iodine is a cofactor for thyroid hormone. Like that's what T3 is, 3 iodines. T4, your thyroid hormone, is 4 iodine molecules. So you definitely need it. And if it's too low, iodine is one of those things that has to be in its sweet spot within the range. So if it's too low, it can lead to hypothyroid and thyroid issues. But if it's too high, it can lead to thyroid issues as well. So it is worth testing and making sure that you're within the therapeutic range. And you can get it from seaweed, or you can get it from fish if you're a fish eater. But if you're not, you can get it from a little bit of seaweed. You can get it from salt if you eat iodized salt, or you can get it from a supplement. And why don't you tell us how the joy of testing an iodine level?
Yes, so I'll just give a story of how I quickly discovered how important this was. um, when you start seeing when you start moving towards understanding the value of nutrition in a whole food, plant based diet, or just eating whole foods in general, and you're always telling people to remove sodium and they're removing salt. Um, we don't think about what's coming along with that iodized salt, right? At least I didn't in the very beginning. But then people would move to this whole food, plant based diet, no salt, oil, sugar, which is fine. But the problem is they removed their iodine source. They weren't consuming nori or some of these sea vegetables that you would have iodine resources. I never ate fish when growing up either, just because I lived in New Mexico in the desert and we didn't have money, number one. Two, to get I mean, the fish that you're eating is like you're like eating catfish or something. It was always no, it was never appealing to me. So I was never a fish eater generally. Um, but I had some folks come in and their thyroid, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, had started to creep upwards. And that wasn't way out of range, but it was certainly outside of the normal range, meaning that their thyroid was not producing enough T4, and which converts into T3 in your peripheral tissues. So what ended up coming about when you start digging around and trying to figure out what's going on is that they were just having low iodine sources. So we replaced their iodine and it all went back to normal. So to collect this, to actually do a really good understanding of how much iodine you have, you need to collect your pee, your urine for 24 hours. Yes, 24 hours peeing in a cup and putting it in the fridge. And then you have a good idea. Your serum iodine is not a good way to determine unless you're like super low. I guess you probably show up low as well. But that really is the best way. Now, when I've talked to patients as well, I mean, I've had patients, so many people come in on a ton of supplements and they'll come in on 1,000 micrograms of iodine. That is way too much, guys. Now, typically what you'll want is around 150 micrograms per day. That can be found in around a quarter to half a teaspoon of iodized salt. Again, your foods will also have a little bit of iodine, potatoes and different things. If you have good soil content and nutrients, will kind of be, reflected in your food sources. But again, you don't need more than that. Now, when you're pregnant, you may need more, a little bit more than that. One other thing is people are worried about certain food groups that can actually decrease or have trouble with your thyroid. They worry about soy or things like, broccoli and different things. That's only a problem in the scenario of low iodine. And so, as long as you have sufficient iodine, you're okay to eat all those foods. I've been eating all those foods for 14 years as far as, just being strictly whole food plant based. And I've had Hashimoto's thyroiditis for almost 30 years. And my doses decreased when I went on a plant based diet because of inflammation decreasing and that autoimmune component had improved. So, again, when people tell me, oh, I have thyroid disease, that's why I'm tired, that's why I'm struggling to lose weight, it's like if you are well optimized with your medication, that's not the cause. There's other things going on now. And so,
Up a good point, because some people are trying to be super healthy and they might start drinking green smoothies, or they really significantly increase their cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale,
mhm,
things like that. Or they're eating a lot of good, clean tofu, tempeh, which is super good for you. But if it is worth checking an iodine, and I do that with my patients, because if your iodine is low and nobody's ever checked it and you're not replacing it, then you have to be a little bit careful eating that level of cruciferous vegetables and soy. But once the iodine is okay, as you just said, then it's fine. You could enjoy all those foods, and you should, because they're so good for you. And we're hoping people are eating those foods.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think we got our iodine down. I will take on potassium.
All
So
right.
so potassium, I think, is on a lot of people's minds. Number one, potassium, you can kind of think of it. when you increase your potassium rich foods, it's going to help you buffer when you do consume sodium as well. So that's kind of a nice little seesaw. You can think of it that way. What are some of the symptoms? Are muscle cramps, fatigue. You can have palpitations. You can have elevated blood pressure. So potassium rich foods are fantastic for your blood pressure. Okay, that's step one. You can test your serum potassium. It's very good. We check it most standardized tests like your basic metabolic panel, BMP, basic metabolic panel, or a comprehensive metabolic panel, as CMP, which will also include your liver and a few other things. Those will have potassium on them, and we're constantly checking potassium. These are very, very common things that your doctor's gonna be checking, especially if you're on certain medications, like diuretics that will lower your potassium amounts. And so, those things you need to pay attention to. So if you're struggling at night with leg cramps and things like that, or heart palpitations, think about what are those potassium-rich foods. And we're talking potatoes. People think about bananas. You can think about um, all sorts of good things. We have avocado. You can do your dark green leafies again. Again, lots of plant foods have plenty of potassium, but you may be on those medications that actually decrease it. So just think about that. I think majority of adults, they say, probably get half of what they consider adequate intake. And so, because so many of us are not consuming enough of those plants, for sure. So that would be the majority. Most of the time, I don't have any potassium issues unless it's a medication induced issue for majority of my patients. But any thoughts, Chris, on the
It's
potassium?
and it's one of those nutrients we always want to be getting more of, except for the only people are people with kidney disease that once
Yeah.
it gets that you want to watch your potassium levels. But so for those people, I'm sure they know to be watching that, working with their nephrologists and their nutritionists. But for everyone else, yeah, it's one of those things that we want to get more of.
I would say especially stage 3 and 4 or beyond of kidney disease, that's when you start seeing the kidney unable to manage its potassium levels. So now I have had a really funny case happen to me. I had a lady reach out to me from Canada. I can't practice medicine in Canada, but she just reached out to me in an appointment because she's just like, can I just talk to you about my labs? And I'm like, sure. So she came to me, and she had gone to a whole food plant-based diet and reversed her type 2 diabetes. I think she lost almost 100 pounds, had came off blood pressure medications, all these meds. And now her doctor tested her, just remember how we talked about this metabolic panel, and her potassium was elevated. Now, mind you, her kidney function was perfect. And her doctor's like, it's your plant-based diet. You're eating too much potassium. I was like, what? I was like, "What did your doctors?" I was like, "Was this a doctor, or was this like because this seems pretty obvious to me what this would be." She's like, "Yeah, and he had it tested twice. It's too high, and he says it's my plant-based diet, but my plant-based diet helped me do all these things. Help." I was like, "This is not your plant-based diet." I was like, "What this is that you're probably having a problem. You're having a traumatic vena puncture, right?" So what happens is when they put that little tourniquet on you and you're doing this like this, or when they put it in and they might have had to jostle around a little bit, sometimes your blood cells will rupture and release all that potassium that was in them. And so it's an artificially false elevated potassium, guys. So make sure you're well hydrated when you
Yep.
go to get your blood drawn, and don't do this like a crazy human.
Well,
You can do it a few times.
also, the blood sits too long and they don't spin it right away. That's the number one cause of high potassium is lab error, especially
Mhm.
function is good. Usually it's they didn't run it fast enough. So always if your potassium is high, just first redraw it. Well, look at your kidney function too, but then
And
always
supplements. Now you may be supplementing
that's true.
high doses of potassium. So pay attention to your supplements. How are they drawn? So what we did for her is like try to get your doctor to get these, or at least pay for it yourself. Go get them to draw two different independent blood tests on each side. Don't do this. And sure enough, guess what? Her potassium came back normal. And she was relieved to be able to continue eating the way that had got her back to her good health. So anyway, guys, if something doesn't look right, don't just assume it on the first bite. If something doesn't make sense, just keep digging. But yeah, don't let your doctor tell you your plant-based diet unless you're on unless you do have kidney disease, is an issue. So, all right, I'm just making sure we don't miss any questions. Okay, what's the next one you want to take on?
I will take on, I guess I can take on B vitamins, just kind
Okay, those are
of.
good. Yeah, yeah.
And so we covered B12 already and some of the signs and symptoms, but the rest of the B vitamins. So again, these foods are in our plant foods. So everyone, whatever diet you're on, should be getting plant foods. So it's in your leafy greens, it's in your nuts and seeds, which are great sources. It's in legumes, it's in whole grains. You know, things like lentils, super high. All of those nuts and seeds are going to give you extra B vitamins. So avocado is super high in them. So wonderful foods. But if you're not absorbing it for some reason, or you're not eating enough plant foods, you can have low. And some of the things you might find with low B vitamins, one is energy can be low. Mood can be altered. Sometimes people do need a little extra B vitamins. And what also needs, we talked about this with the B12 and the homocysteine, but it has to be methylated to be activated. And that's not just the B12, that's some of the other B vitamins as well. They have to be methylated and activated. So even though you're eating these good foods, and that can be a genetic thing where some people just, they have a little more fatigue, maybe brain fog, maybe they're not sleeping well. And when we find this genetic abnormality, or we find low levels, or with some of these symptoms, we may put people on B complex or some B vitamins, and we do see people improve. I had a patient recently who was just not sleeping at all and just felt low energy and could not understand why. I was eating a very good comprehensive diet, pretty broad type diet, and with lots and lots of plants. And she just was not feeling well. And so we checked her levels and we did some genetic testing, and we saw that she was not methylating. We gave her some B vitamins, B3. B2, B3, B6, and B9, folate. And she actually started sleeping. It improved her sleep significantly, improved her mood, her focus. So that is something, it's not the most common, but it is out there where I am seeing people that need extra B vitamins. And I want to warn people to be careful. If people start taking super high amounts of B vitamins, certain people can't metabolize those high levels and will actually feel horrible. So if you get a headache or you feel off, you feel kind of dizzy, it can be too much folate or B vitamins for certain people. So I replace B vitamins only for people who need it for a reason and watch how they're due and in the right amounts. So it's kind of, there's a little bit of, you want to get it just right for that person, but it can make a difference for people, for certain people. So it's where
Mhm.
one thing to look for, if you get that cracking in the side of your mouth, that can be a B vitamin deficiency, actually, or poor wound healing, and it's another reason for rashes, things like that, can be B vitamins.
Yeah. And I would say B6 specifically also with toxicity, it can actually cause nerve tingling and strange sensations. Sometimes people take it for the nerve. If it gets worse, stop it because you may be overdosing. So I think that's a really um,
And there's an
interesting one.
a B vitamin deficiency. So back in the day, we used to see something called pellagra, which
Hmm.
B3 deficiency or niacin. And people like in the South, for example, were eating like cornbread and corn and not getting the diverse fruits and vegetables, the colorful fruits and vegetables, and some of these nuts and seeds we're talking about, some of these nutrients. And so they were eating kind of more flour based, corn based foods, and they were low in B3, and they're preventing, we call it the 3D, so dementia, dermatitis like skin rashes, and diarrhea, so gut health stuff. So, and this was a B3 deficiency. So now, bread and stuff is fortified with your B vitamins, and that took care of that problem when they fortified it. But if you're not eating bread, fortified bread, which a lot of us aren't anymore, then you can get it from your plants. And so we don't really see pellagra anymore, but it is possible if you're not eating the right foods or you're not absorbing it. So that's just
Yeah, those are some really good ones. Um, yeah. Anything else on the B vitamins you want to
one
highlight?
vitamin.
Okay. So I would say one other interesting one I've seen is choline. And it's interesting because when I switch to a whole food plant based diet, there will be some times that I'll audit my diet to make sure that I'm consuming adequate amounts, because I just want to make sure I'm eating a diverse plant-based diet. I like all plants except for olives. They're just something about them. This anyway, everything else is open game, right? And as I went through, I was never low on anything, calcium, iron, all that thing, except for choline. I was only getting about half of what I was supposed to be getting as a premenopausal one, which is less of a big deal. As you enter into menopause, your body has a problem because you can make some of your own, but you still should get some of it from the diet. And when you don't, when you're in a low deficient choline status, there can be a few things and it can be kind of problematic, including fatty liver. I had two patients that presented with unknown causes of fatty liver. They were ones that was in her early 40s, one was in her early 50s, and she'd been to GI. They've had liver biopsies, all sorts of stuff. So we started going down the rabbit hole. And when we started replacing their choline with phosphatidylcholine, actually everything got better. And so it's some really interesting things that can happen here with choline. So choline, the richest source, of course, is eggs. But on a plant-based diet, again, I will have people who go from already restricted diet to even more restricted diet because they don't consume, let's say, soy because they heard soy was bad. Soy is not bad for you guys. It's very good. Like if you have an allergy, that's fine. That's an understand thing. But soy has fantastic sources of amino acids. It's great for cholesterol. It's a great source of protein. But also your cruciferous vegetables, right? So maybe they cut out cruciferous vegetables and soy because they heard that was bad for your thyroid. It's like, no, stop it. So these are some amazing resources. But again, I just wanted to point that out. That many Americans aren't getting sufficient choline. And if you are pregnant or planning to get pregnant, choline is a very important thing to consider. It can also cause an elevated homocysteine. There's another pathway here. And again, if you have troubles with methylation because of genetics, that can be an issue as well. So anyway, I just wanted to point out choline because I don't think we quite talk about that very much. It's almost seen as a anyway, there's more conversation around it. But any thoughts on the choline that you wanted to mention?
No, but I agree with you. As people get on limited diets, then you have limited exposure and resources for it. And there are certain people that have genetics that don't absorb choline as well anyway. So if you're not eating as much, that might be an issue. So so really if you're able to eat a diverse diet and you're eating lots of different foods, it's not an issue for everyone, but it can be. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
good to check it out.
But you can do an audit. I like the app called Chronometer, Cronometer, Chronometer, and just put in your food for a week and just see if it's your normal fare of eating. Just see what you're low in, and make sure that you're hitting those markers. So then you have a general idea. And then if you're running deficient, you can say, okay, what foods do I need to increase? And if I'm unable to get those foods, is it wise for me to supplement? Because we're not going to be pushing supplements here. We just want people to be aware, especially in this world that we're living in, where so many people eat ultra processed foods and we're not paying attention to the quality of our food sometimes, or we can't, or we have limited choices. Just seeing what we can do. So, colors and variety of foods is really important. I would like to bring out one thing. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a micronutrient, but something else is fiber. Do you want to? I know do you want to talk about fiber because you were like gut queen. So,
Well, I can talk about fiber. I think we both probably talk about that one a lot. But
mhm.
so when they look at the population, the United States or maybe even the world, but certainly we're deficient as a country as a whole. It's one of the micronutrients that's most deficient is fiber. So the recommended amount FDA for women is 25 grams a day, and for men is 35 grams. And there's argument that maybe you even need more than that. When they look at hunter gatherers from long time ago, they were probably getting closer to 50 and even 100 grams of fiber a day sometimes. So the higher amount of fiber is going to be important. And yeah, so diverse fibers has been shown more than 30 different types of plants a day. That's the different fibers that you're going to get have been shown to feed different microbiome, and you get that diverse microbiome that we're looking for. So, and fiber is not found in animal products at all. So it's only found in plants. So it's going to be in your fruits and vegetables. It's going to be in your whole grains. It's going to be in your nuts and seeds and in your legumes. So those are really good sources of fiber. And so for whatever diet you're on, you want to make sure you have diverse different types of fiber and that you're getting it throughout the day with every single meal. And if you're not used to eating fiber and you suddenly bring in a large amount of fiber, your microbiome has to actually break down that fiber, and your microbiome can't. It's not used to it. It breaks down what it's used to, and you grow the type of bacteria. And so if you start bringing in fiber, you bring it in slowly and let those microbiomes start getting used to it, and then bring in more fiber and more, and you can gradually increase it. And there's all sorts of tricks we both have, I know, that if people are not tolerating their fiber, that we can slow it down and digest it for them by blending it or cooking it ahead of time, and different ways you can do it. But the goal is to have diverse fiber, to eat this diet, to feed the microbiome. So hopefully you're eating foods like that throughout the day.
That's fantastic. Yes, more fiber, guys. And, we're walking around fiber deficient, but if you're eating a plant-based diet, I mean, I will get 75, 80 grams easily daily without even trying. And so once you get there, but I always ate a lot of that because beans and vegetables were cheap, and that's what we grew our own vegetables. We ate a ton of beans and potatoes, less meat. Probably ate it 2 or 3 times a week just because it was cheaper to not. And so I never had a trouble with the gut issue, but the lentils, start with lentils if you're, struggling with the beans piece, because that really will make a difference. So someone is asking, Liz Tab is asking, are you going to discuss sodium, especially if always low and not on a diuretic? I think the majority of Americans aren't walking around with a problem. They're of a sodium excess because of the ultra processed foods, or they go out to eat a lot and there's a lot of salt added to those foods, which will have sodium chloride. So, but there certainly are individuals who do struggle, or they may actually have low sodium. Now, remember, it's important to understand that when you have labs done, this reference range is around 95% of the population. You might run just a little bit low and be asymptomatic and be okay. So if someone is chronically low, but they are symptomatic, that's a different issue versus someone's like, I've always been low, but I always feel fine. But then you want to pay attention to, well, what is your diet? What's going on? Um, they mentioned, majority of Americans are consuming probably twice as much as we need. Minimally, you probably want around 1,500 milligrams per day, higher than, I don't know what, 2,000, 2,200. You're probably reaching the upper limit of what you reasonably need. So again, the hyponatremia is what we consider low sodium. The big thing is if you're doing endurance sports, you can be a salty sweater and lose that. So let's say that you run a long distance and you're only replacing water, you can run into a problem with drinking too much fluid and not replacing that salt, that sodium, and you become hyponatremic, which can cause issues. You can actually go into coma and you can die from these type of things. Um, Older adults can be an issue, of course. They may be on medications like the diuretics, which can cause certain ones can cause you to be low. You may have kidney issues where we don't regulate that sodium very well. There's a few different things. You have some adrenal issues, the adrenal glands can cause it. Again, drinking excessive water could be a problem. So people are like, I need to be more hydrated. Again, how quickly you're drinking it, what you're drinking it. I think there was I can't remember where it was. Maybe it was in California. There was like a radio show contest, and they were like, who can drink a gallon of water under 5 minutes? And I think a lady died. So she drank so much water so quickly, she became hyponatremic. Her brain swollen because this is osmotic, right? The fluids shift and trying to balance everything. And she actually died. So you got to be very, very careful about those things. Now, of course, there's going to be some other things going on. You got to be careful if you have heart failure, kidney disease, certain medications, certain depression medications like SSRIs can cause the kidney to hold on to too much water, like SIADH, syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone. Yeah. So anyway, what it does is it makes you keep too much water and then it dilutes your sodium. So cirrhosis, anything else that you can think of? It's like,
Well, I will say, plant-based eaters, some of them are not eating any salt. The SOS free diet, salt free diet, or eating super low salt. If
yeah,
you any salt, you really can't drink a lot of water because what happens is you're flushing it out. And I have seen people come in with sodium so low that it's pretty significant. It's supposed to be between 135 and 145, and people come in at like 125, which is very low. Uh,
Mhm.
and that is actually extremely dangerous, even if it's happening slowly and you don't necessarily feel it. People might feel numbness or tingling around their lips, or get a little lightheaded, or get tingling, or just feel off. But
Yeah.
really is too low. And so I actually don't recommend a salt-free diet for people. I do think that a little bit of salt to keep your sodium, because honestly, sodium for nerve transport. It's what conducts the nerve, and so you have sodium transport gates, and so you need to have an optimal level of sodium. And actually, when those people have been low, and we've one cut back on their water intake and two replaced just a little bit of sodium, that
Mhm.
feel better. They think clear, they're more focused, and they're not lightheaded anymore. And they're like, whoa, what a difference it is. And to be honest, it's a U-shaped curve where when people went really low sodium, they did not do as well. And the sweet spot was somewhere between, like you said, 1500 to maybe 2300 was the sweet spot. And more than that, it was started to have maybe other side effects of high salt, but it was up to like 2300. And so it was somewhere in there. Maybe you could go a little lower than 1500, but somewhere in that range is probably the best spot. So if your sodium is low, my first thought is the number one reason I personally am seeing in my practice is people aren't eating salt and they're drinking too much. And so one, you got to cut back on fluids, and two, I would do just a pinch of salt, because if you just do a little bit of that salt, you won't be the high salt that we're seeing in people who are buying processed foods and it's already salted. That's the crazy salted stuff. So just that little bit to bring it up. And then if you're already doing that, you're having that little bit, you're not over drinking, then yes, do all the workup and certainly check your kidneys and your liver and heart failure and SIDH, which you can just do osmotic labs pretty easily and check for that and rule that out. So, but those are less common than
Yeah.
people just drinking too much water and not taking in any salt.
Yeah. So again, it's depending on the person, what you're doing. Um, but there's our thoughts on the salt. So I think we've covered the majority, if not everything, that I think about
Right.
on a daily basis, don't you?
Yeah. The last one we could talk protein. You want to take that one?
Oh, protein. Ugh, protein. So it's interesting. So we speak about protein. You can get plenty of protein on a plant-based diet. I'm just going to throw that out there for my plant-based eaters. Don't think that you can't. But again, gets back down to this really restrictive diet, right? When you're only eating a pound of vegetables for breakfast and a big, you know, salad for lunch, and you cut out beans because, they cause bloating or whatever. Lots of different things. But if you're eating a wide variety, really hone in on those beans, legumes, whole grains. You get plenty of protein there. Now, some individuals, if they have, let's say, a limited appetite, especially if you're on like GLP-1s and things, you may want to add some extra protein powders or something just to make sure that you're consuming enough of those things. Because what I can see is some people are so aggressively taking these medications that uh, they're not eating enough to sustain a healthy diet, a good weight, like a normal healthy weight. So, lots of interesting things there. But anyway, yeah. So you're probably going to need, and if you look at your ideal body weight, just a rough estimate. I'm giving you two rough estimates, guys. It doesn't mean I'm telling you this has to be it for everyone. It's just a rough estimate. I said this rough estimate is a BMI of around 22 to start with, or if you're 5 foot, let's start there with 100 pounds and 5 pounds per inch thereafter. Okay. That's just a rough getting started estimate. It might be a little lower, it might be higher. Yeah. I'm just telling you kind of how to get some general thoughts going. That would be your pounds, divide that by 2.2. That puts you into kilograms. From there, you probably want to minimally be at 1 gram, preferably around 1.2, no more than 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram. That being said, again, there's people who are going to be doing really heavy resistance training, wanting to become hypertrophy, focus on hypertrophy of the muscle, building more muscle mass. Yes, but that will sustain someone who's doing regular exercise. That'll be more than enough. But less than one, As we get older, especially, we do worry about that muscle loss. But when you think about muscle loss, but you also need to be thinking about resistance training. So you want to give a reason for the muscle to hang on to that protein. So you need to be lifting some heavy things. So that's one thing I want to highlight. But on occasion, I will see someone walk in, and when we increase their protein, they feel better because they were doing, again, like I said, a much more restricted diet than a healthy, broad diet where you're consuming a lot of different healthy whole foods. That's the and that's the main message: is eat a variety of your whole
Excellent.
foods. Whatever dietary preference you have, eat a variety of
Mm.
all those foods, right? And so um, it's just such an important thing. But what you can see on labs is a low creatine or creatinine, excuse me. And women who will feel fatigued, they're struggling with satiety. And if we add in a little bit more protein sources like those beans and whole grains, they feel much more energetic, and they're not as hungry, right? And so one thing that I like to do, it's like one of my little tricks, is adding lupini bean flakes to everything. I should buy stock. It's just like the lupini bean flakes. The Aviate, Aviate is a great brand off of Amazon. I'll put it in my oatmeal. I'll put it in my smoothies, my soups, my chilies. But anyway, that's quarter cup, 80 calories, 12 grams of protein. That's a huge portion. But anyway, any thoughts there for you? I could talk about it all day.
No, same idea that you can definitely get it from a plant-based diet. So people who are eating a diverse plant-based diet, it's no problem at all. But people get limited. I know I was limited on my diet for a while because of food sensitivities, and I was on this healing restrictive plan, and I was not focusing on protein, so I wasn't getting a lot. And so then as I diversified my diet and brought I was just mindful of it and paid attention to
Right.
different sources of protein with each meal. I certainly felt better and stronger. You can see people with things like just fatigue or slow wound healing, maybe sarcopenia, not putting on muscle mass. And so I do audits of my patients with their diets now and look at what are they eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and do they have a source of protein? Because there are some people who are maybe they're trying to lose weight or reverse diabetes, and they're eating fruit for a meal and they're only eating 2 meals. And so if that's the case, then you only have one source, one meal. And if you're just eating a quarter cup of beans and a salad, well, that's not going to be enough for you. So
Yeah.
just sure that each meal, and you can definitely do it plant-based. You can eat beans, you can eat soy, you can eat whole grains, vegetables have some nuts and seeds have it. So you just, as long as you're eating a diverse diet and you're actually paying attention to it, I think people are fine. But if you're eating fruit and calling it a day or something for several meals, then those are the ones people that, and I definitely got myself in trouble with that, I think, at one point as well. So I'm very aware of it. And I want to say one thing. I had made a comment about salt, that I don't recommend a no salt diet. There are some people that are working with their doctors and that it is actually important. So if you are doing that,
Talk to your doctor.
yeah, just make sure you're checking your labs and you work with your doctor, because I didn't mean to say that it was never appropriate, because sometimes it is the right thing to do for that person.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add salt, but it'll add salt to the whole recipe. But I'm not doing that very often. So
Well, I had
again,
trouble with low salt myself.
yeah.
So
But you
I,
had kidney stuff
I
going on.
kidney stuff in as well, and I was not eating salt because I thought I wasn't supposed to eat salt,
Mhm.
and it got me in pretty good trouble. So I had to, now I do that little bit, but other people are getting low salt as well. I'm not the only one who that's happened to, so it's just worth keeping an eye on that. Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, there's some crazy stuff out there on the internet, guys, where people are telling you to take tons of salt that don't do that either. So oh, there's some I'm yeah, as we're building our social media presence, like we're looking at Instagram and TikTok, like I don't usually go on there to do like that's just not my thing. Now I may scroll through, Substack because I love reading what people are writing here. But some of the other stuff I'm just sitting here going, are you serious? People are actually getting away with this. But someone did ask, Gary's asking, may we know how much meat, fish, eggs, and both of you doctors eat per day per week? Gary, I haven't eaten any meat, dairy, eggs, fish in 14 years. So I am strictly whole food plant-based. So, Chris?
Yeah, I'm whole food plant-based too. I had a piece of fish here and there when I wasn't able to eat beans for a while, so I didn't want to do protein powders, so I did that bite a few bites of fish, but which I did enjoy. But I'm plant-based, whole food plant-based too.
Yeah.
But
So,
I have significant health issues as well that I am always working on improving. So
yeah, and it's an evolving, but, um, so I started it just because I had a patient do so well, on accidentally recommended because she said meat and dairy upset her stomach, so I said, "Stop eating meat and dairy." And she came back 30 days later, she felt better, um, this was in 2012, but her daughter went plant-based with her, and I didn't even have that word in my vocabulary then, and she stopped 2 ADD medications in 30 days at 16 years old, and so then I went down the rabbit hole, and I just kept on going, and so, I'm a it's now the way I do it is like, listen, eat more whole foods and get more fiber on your plate. Whatever you choose, you can't go wrong with that. So, I'm not telling anyone like you should only eat a whole food plant-based diet. That is what I do. I feel like people do really well on that diet when it's well planned, and you understand the basics. Now, some people still choose to consume meat or dairy or whatever, and that's fine. But if I had to say give up one or the other, I say definitely give up the dairy. I think it's very gut irritating for many people. My husband's Filipino, so two of my kids are highly sensitive to dairy consumption, will break out in eczema and have severe gut issues. So they haven't consumed dairy for many years as well. But just be aware of that, and it makes sense because they tell us, as family medicine physicians, we take care of the whole family. So when we have little ones that we're taking care of, you're checking around a year old to make sure they're not anemic. And the number one they say is if you find that the child's anemic, tell the mom to pull back on consumption of cow's dairy, cow's milk, because it causes inflammation in the gut and can cause microbleeding and become anemic as a child. I'm like, why would we tell someone to drink that if it's going to cause gut issues? So it only makes sense that adults will also have that acne, joint pain, constipation. I remember having severe constipation as a kid. Got rid of the dairy, it all went away. So again, just some things to think about. We're not preaching to do it, but that's my story. Chris had lupus and she went down her path. And we've had some amazing results patient. But I have patients who still eat meat too. And we work with that and it's no big deal. Just make sure we're getting more fiber because fiber is good for our gut and we're all
and
around better.
are doing dairy, the yogurt and kefir, there actually is some good studies with that
There's
because
better, yeah.
did dairy actually have some real benefits if you tolerate it. But you're right, there are a lot of people that are lactose intolerant that taking it out will feel better. And autoimmune people, there's a lot of people who feel better with autoimmune taking it out. That's the first thing I tell because it's very inflammatory. It can be very inflammatory. So, yep.
Yeah. So someone is asking about, well, Gary, I wouldn't say it. In some circles, you could say you're vegan, but that's more of the ethical discussion. Now, it doesn't mean that over time, like I just went plant based because the data and the science kind of pushed me in that direction, and my thyroid improved, my allergies completely went away, and I feel amazing. I'll be 56 this year, so I feel like I'm aging really well. I'm gonna go run 5 miles after our conversation today. So I mean, for me, it's worked really, really well. And for over the years, you cannot stop learning and you see what, certain dietary patterns are going to cause more strain in our environment. And then the ethical treatment of animals. And, I feel like you got to be careful what you say doing things, but you kind of become more in line with that and you can understand it, right? As you broaden your perspective based on your choices in life, things will lead you down paths if you walk with an open mind and be skeptical but open minded at the same time, you can't help but appreciate someone else's thoughts and values and opinions. And you take what works for you and you move on. But yeah, I would say I actually can, especially yeah, I can lean more into that. But I typically say I'm just plant based or I just eat a very plant forward diet. I don't want to offend anyone or scare anyone away. But yeah, so that's where we're sitting. But
And someone I think had asked about calcium.
yeah,
You can get calcium from leafy greens. You can get it from nuts and seeds and legumes. You can get it from tofu is a very good source of it. So,
Which
but
gets calcium set, yeah.
doing an audit and seeing how much calcium you are getting. And sometimes, like for me, mine was low, but I was able to change my diet and increase calcium rich plant foods. So I was getting it. So you definitely can get it. Some people may need to supplement a little bit of calcium, small, low amounts, but most people can get it from their diet. Hmm.
I would say something that's really important if you have osteopenia, osteoporosis, and your doctors put you on certain medications, you may need to supplement as well, or if you have a parathyroid hormone issue. So
Hmm.
those those are important things to keep in mind. Again, everyone's different. That's why we like to talk about these different things and help you guys start looking at a broader step because sometimes, for example, I've had people come to me who look very, very healthy, right? They're thin, they're very active, but they just something's not feeling right or off. And you do the first, kind of brief review of labs and everything looks pretty normal. The doctor's like, "You're healthy. What are you doing in here? You're healthier than 99% of my patients." But if they're saying something's off and they're
Hmm.
just kind of brushed off, but something is still wrong, right? So don't be afraid to just go digging a little deeper and asking more questions. So that's kind of why I like kind of going into this kind of weeds sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, these
Everyone.
are lessons we've learned. Yeah. Go ahead.
So it's worth just talking a little bit. And so that gives you an idea, like just to think, check your levels or do an audit of your own diet and whatever diet, and for me, the most important thing now is test, don't guess. Make sure your diet's working
Yeah.
for you, whatever you're eating. And so you can adjust it then. If it's not working, if you have inflammation or your blood sugar's still high or you're missing nutrients, then you can adjust and, make sure you're on the right plan for you. And what's working for you might be different from what works for Lori or what works for me or what works for the next person. So super.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're humans, we have the same plumbing, so to speak, but then on things change based on how we were raised, our genetics.
Yeah, different microbiomes, different levels of inflammation, different ways that we handle blood sugar. Like there's
Yeah,
several things related to that. So we may eat in food sensitivities, like we may eat the same food and it works for one person and does not work for the next person.
yeah,
So that's
exactly.
talking about this, but we just want you guys all to just be aware and do your own, yeah, what works for you.
Yeah, and stress and our mental like there's so many things that make everything, but granted there's going to be some general principles that work across the board for human beings, but then we start getting into the weeds to optimize so that you can thrive. So that's why we have these conversations. And
Yep.
again, I think we could probably talk forever, but we've
I-
we've already been going. Thank you, everyone. When this transcript's ready to roll, I will summarize everything. It takes me a second to get that done, so I'll have a lot to go over in this one with all of the different things we talked about. So, okay, thanks everyone for being here. Chris, well, we got lots of heart days. Thanks, everyone. We
yeah.
really appreciate you spending some time. Oh, Carol says, audit of my nutrition help. Is there a reference checklist I can follow to begin? Yeah, Carol, I'll tell you what. I don't know if you are subscribed to myself and to Chris. And when I post today, I'll make sure and mention the Chronometer app and some other things you can do to audit your levels and the blood tests and different things. So I'll make sure that you'll have that reference. Okay. So, and then share this with people, please. This one is a really important conversation. I think that will be very beneficial for a lot of different people. So, yeah, it was a good one. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. We
Me too.
appreciate you being here. Have a good day. Bye, Chris.